Good morning, Jay.
Good morning, Natalie.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well,
Do
I
it.
feel well. No, I'm not feeling the singing. It might come right in between the middle.
You just break out in song?
I'm going to randomly break out in song.
Our
I
guest is really going to love
she's
that.
like, "What podcast is this again? Like, what did I sign up for? Why is Natalie singing?" Here, I
I
could
would
like
like,
vocal warm up like me.
can I make a request?
Yes.
So when you break out in song, I would like an ode to me, which is "Ain't no sunshine when you're gone." So if you could practice
Oh,
that, yeah.
ain't
So
no
just think about.
sunshine
Oh,
when
there you go.
she's gone.
Dun dun dun. So this
Okay,
is so
okay,
we,
okay, Jay.
okay. We're
Jay,
done.
stop. We're
Okay,
done.
sorry.
Okay, guys, we're sorry. Okay, we have an amazing guest today. Amazing guest. And when I met Heidi over the phone, she told me a little bit about her story, Jay, and it is unbelievable. I'll just leave it at that. Unbelievable. And I am so excited for her to confess because this is so good. So, Jay, please tell us more about our guest, Heidi McCann.
No problem. So I will say Natalie has a little more insight than me. She got the inside story. So I am really looking forward to this.
Oh,
Today
wait.
we welcome Heidi McCann. So when her longtime boyfriend Curtis was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, Heidi left her job to care for him. She was 23 and he was 25. They spent a year learning to live while preparing to die. And Heidi, that is such an insightful statement for me. When I read it in your bio, I thought, that's really something. It's something to really think about. You married 22 days before his death. At that time, Curtis was 26 and Heidi was 24. But that is not the end of Heidi's story. And that's what's so beautiful about today. Today, Heidi is a wife. She is a mother of 4. She is a writer. And her book is Whatever the Future Holds. And it's a story of love before, during, and after ALS. Heidi, we are so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, I have been so excited about this recording. I mean, I don't like to play favorites because everybody's my favorite, but this was such a unique story. I know our listeners are like, Natalie, get on with it. So, like, oh my gosh. So, Heidi, I would say, start from the beginning. But so you were born, but your caregiving journey didn't start with Curtis. It started with about 50 stuffed animals.
I think it was 55.
55.
Is that right?
55 stuffed animals. And so clearly this was ingrained early on. And tell us, there were some nuggets of wisdom that your mom gave you that I think prepared you and set you up for the path that you've been led on. So tell us about those 55 stuffed animals you were caring for. It started early.
It did. I can envision it so clearly. I was in my home I lived in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm a math person in addition to writing, so I remember clearly there were 55, all sorts of animals. And so when I was younger, probably around 5 or 6, I would allow them to sleep on my bed and I would sleep on the floor because these babies had to be comfortable. And I think, my memory's not totally 100% from that long ago, but I imagine this went on for quite a while. And my mother came in and whatever day and basically said, Heidi, what are you doing? You're not sleeping in your bed. You must be tired. What's going on? And I said, well, these animals, they need to sleep comfortably and there's no room for me, plus all of them. And she said, Heidi, you have to take care of yourself first to be the best caregiver you can be. And, when Kurt got sick and through some other things in my life when I've been a caregiver, my mother's still with us. She has Parkinson's, but she's doing great. And she still reminds me of that. And I think it is so important because it is so true. To really be able to care well for others, you have to be taking care of yourself.
Look at that. Words of wisdom right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go.
Right from the
I
get-go.
will jump in and tell Heidi, just going back to the stuffed animals, because I always wanted to care as well, Heidi. However, I gave all my stuffed animals a bath. My mom seriously is still bitter about that, so we'll move on. She was not, that was a trash bag incident. So she was like, we're done.
I did not know JJ gave our stuffed animals a bath.
Yeah, it was bad. So I will toss that in there. So I'm glad your mom is a super sweet. My mom was like, the stuffed animals don't need a bath. So
because they never fully dry.
Yeah.
No, they did not make it through the bath.
Those are
they
some
did not
nasty
make it
stuffed
through,
animals. So, so fast forward, you grew up in Connecticut and went to college, and you met Kurt at some point. Tell us, let's fast forward. Let's fast forward a little.
Sure. So I'll actually back up just a tad. So Kurt and I met when I was 15 and he was 17. So we knew each other for a very long time before he got sick. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. Curtis was from the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont, and my grandfather was born up there. And as a result, my parents had a cottage, and my mom was a teacher, so we would spend our summers up in the Northeast Kingdom. So we met that first summer when I was 15 and he was 17. We dated, and then we dated on and off. And one of the reasons I chose to go to college in Vermont was to be close to Kurt, and we started dating my junior year of college.
Oh my God, I felt like summer lovin' over here. Like summer lovin' had me a blast.
Oh no, there's the song today, Heidi.
I'm sorry. I love this. I love that you all, I forgot that. I apologize for that. I love that.
No.
It sounds like this whole like romantic, like I feel like, I can't remember the guy who writes all the love letter and all that stuff. Whatever his name is. I felt like it's that. And I love that.
A lot of teenage drama.
Oh.
A lot of teenage drama.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, keep going.
So yeah, he had other girlfriends. I had some interests, but he was always my love. I mean, he was my first love. So after I graduated from school, he had a job in Essex Junction, which is right outside of Burlington, Vermont, and we decided to move in together. Yeah. So we were living together for a full year, and then he started to not feel well. And little things in hindsight that escalated really, really quickly. Meaning he worked construction on his days off from where he worked in Burlington. And so literally one day, he went to step up a step with a concrete form on his shoulder and couldn't lift a leg. And then another day he tripped, walking out of the general store with a coffee in hand. So anyway, it took a couple of months to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
And and when he was diagnosed, he had a very progressive form of ALS. In his case, it was familial, meaning genetic, and he was given 6 to 12 months to live. And that was, just unbelievable, quite frankly. As me being who I am, I was okay once we knew what it was. Those months of not understanding were super difficult for everybody involved. But once we knew what it was like, okay, let's make a plan. What are we going to do? And unfortunately with ALS, at least as quickly as his progressed, there weren't any plans. You just had to live day by day. But we did move out of our apartment in New Haven, Vermont, which is just north of Middlebury, Vermont, and moved to his hometown of Danville, which is in the Northeast Kingdom, so in the middle of nowhere. And people have asked me over the years, why? He was your boyfriend. Why did you do this? There was never a question. I never thought about it. I loved him. That's what you do, or at least that's how I felt. So, and then, there was that beginning time, there was a lot of anger, a lot of confusion. And then there was a turning point where he really was like, okay, this is the hand I was dealt. I'm going to make the most of it. And we became very spiritual and spent time with people from all over the town. A friend of his wife would do healing circles where we would, have people just come to our home and send positive energy to Curtis. And that was really the time when things became beautiful.
So, go Jay.
No, I love that. First of all, it was never a question for you. And I think that's so important to never, as a caregiver, to never say, I can only care for a family member. And that we've talked to so many people who've said, I decided to care for a neighbor. It was a coworker. It was this. And that while this was, this is a partner and, you're in a relationship where this is, a husband of that sort of generality, but it doesn't have to be that sort of legal tie, I think is how we look at it. Caregivers come in all different shapes and forms and fashions, but it's interesting because you were like, tell me about your career, that where were you guys? He was working. What were you doing?
What were you doing?
Great question. So I went to Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont, and right before I graduated, they offered me a job in their development office, which is essentially fundraising, for the lack of a better description, but it's really relationship building. And they offered me that job because I had worked on the senior gift. And the reason I worked on the senior gift was because we wanted to have it be in honor and memory of a classmate we had lost our junior year. And that meant a lot to me. So that's what I did. I also played tennis and squash at Middlebury when I was in college, and the tennis team needed an assistant coach. So I was doing development work and also coaching. Interestingly enough, after 9 months of development work, I decided this is not for me. Being in the office is not for me. And so I was coaching tennis and teaching tennis full time when Kurt got sick.
Wow.
I brought the boys down to Nashville, Tennessee that fall when Kurt started to not feel well, to compete. And it was a really exciting time. Yeah. And again, though, in hindsight, I'm like, wow, that was a lot to give up. But in the moment, I just did it.
So it never occurred to you, maybe this is his family's responsibility. Maybe this is, because you did move back to where he lives, so that's helpful. But nobody, you're not married. In society's eyes, are like, oh, well, we'd get it if you left. You liked him, but, you're not married. So, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yes. And so his town is very small. His parents lived there. Two of his older brothers lived there. He was the middle of 5 boys. And so, yes, it's such a good question. So we ended up moving into his aunt and uncle's home that he had actually built with the company that he worked for on his days off from his other job. And it was right actually in the middle of, in proximity, it was right by his brothers, right by his parents, a 2-minute drive, 1-minute drive. And in that moment, yes, there were times that I would say, what is going on? Why am I doing this? Especially when things got really tough physically. Right. And his family was very much present. They were there. Mm-hmm. The ins and outs of caring for him, they were not part of that. Mm-hmm. In the moment, I thought a lot about, in this case, it was a familial disease. ALS had inflicted his ancestors back to the 1800s, according to their records.
Wow.
They did not know that it was ALS. They weren't fully aware of it. It ended up, it's actually a fascinating story, although it's very tragic. When Kurt was officially diagnosed at Mass General in Boston, which is where we went to be treated, they actually had historical documents from his family dating back to the 1800s. And when Curtis's grandmother got the disease, so this was his mom's mom, her mother, who had researched and had this knowledge of a disease, a paralyzing disease, which is what they called it back then, that had inflicted ancestors before. She basically, took Kurt's mom and her siblings aside and said, don't have children. Your mother is dying from something that so many other ancestors have. But again, there was no tag on it. Nobody understood it exactly. And so when Kurt did get sick, I always thought of it in the sense of, this is too much. It's too much for his family to physically see day in and day out, or moment by moment, because they could have it themselves. And I think that adds a layer that, even though I was 23 and probably didn't think all of that through, I felt it. And there were certainly some tense moments over that year. There's no doubt about it. I have remained very close with his family, and that's very important to me. And they're very supportive of my current husband and my children, and that's really special to me.
Oh, I love that. That is so interesting. Jay, I know we need to take a break real quick. We'll be right back, and let's pick right back up when we get back.
Okay.
Hey, ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
Hey, everybody, we are back here, and we're talking with Heidi McCann and a diagnosis for a boyfriend that was diagnosed with MLS,
ALS.
And, Lou Gehrig's. I'm sorry, ALS and Lou Gehrig's. But we talked about the before, and now we're in the during.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we left off.
So you guys, it almost sounds a little bit like Sue Ryan, Jay, when she talks about radical acceptance. And a colleague of ours talks about having that acceptance. And that's what it sounds like you guys did. Because I'm not going to lie to you. If I'm 23 and I'm with my boyfriend, we're not married. Yes, we've known each other a long time. That puts a lot of pressure on a relationship. Do you ever have in your mind, do you ever go to those places you're like, what am I doing? Like, what if I want to go over here and hang out and hide for a while, or I'll just drive off and then just see what happens. You know what I mean? Like there are times that I wanted to do that. When I was in New York, I just wander around the streets in my little hood in my 2-block radius because Jason would follow me to make sure I didn't get killed. And I'd just be like, I'm just going to go and just pretend for a while in a couple of block circles.
100%. So there's one moment that sticks out for me, and again, so many of these memories, although this was almost 25 years ago, so many of these memories are so fresh because it did take me so long to write the book. So I have relived it over and over again. But so with Kurt in our situation, again, when we kind of came, both of us, to that acceptance and we became very spiritual, along with that came this optimism, this feeling of, number one, we can beat this. So we did do a ton of alternative therapies and spiritual things where, and he was on a clinical trial through Mass General. So there was always that little bit of hope. And he had it probably more than I did, in all honesty, but I went with him because you have to, because the minute you start to go down that rabbit hole of this is a terminal illness, I've been given 6 to 12 months to live, life was pretty miserable. So we lived as though we could beat it. There was one day, I mean, there were a lot of these moments, but one that really sticks out to me, I had just wheeled him down probably about, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a mile, half a mile, to the local restaurant where we love to go. The owner there built a ramp for him so we could go up, and which was, I mean, this town was, Danville, Vermont is an amazing place.
We love you,
and
Danville.
was so much part of our story. Love it. And so anyway, we went down to the Danville Inn, had a tough breakfast because physically Curtis was really struggling. Wheeled him back, and I had to wheel him backwards in the wheelchair because I didn't have the strength to wheel him forward. So I would have to take the brakes off, tip him backwards, and go. And so afterwards, he ended up. I wasn't watching. I didn't put those non-tipping, things back in, and he ended up tipping backwards and hitting his head, and the whole thing was awful. And so then he was in a super bad mood, understandably. So was I. And so long story short, we got into an argument, and he just said, leave, go, I want to be alone. And at that point in time, he was on an external respiratory aid that had a mask over his nose and then a tube, and the tube would always pop off. And if it popped off and no one was there, he wouldn't get his air and he would die. And so I said, Curtis, I can't go anywhere. And he finally said, I just need you to leave. So I left, and I went to another couple of miles up the road to where my parents' family cottage is, and I played tennis and I went water skiing. And the freedom of those hour or two, I'd been caring for Curtis for about 6-8 months at the time, maybe 7, to all of a sudden not be caring for somebody every moment. And I thought, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell Kurt, I can't do this anymore. And I went back, and I think that was the first time we were away from each other for a couple of hours since he was diagnosed. And he just looked at me and he said, I can't do this without you. And I said, well, I can't do this without you, and I'm afraid to lose you, and I think it'll be easier if I go now. Oh. And it was a big moment. And of course, I did say we can't be negative. We can't get angry at each other, because if that's the way it's going to go, then I will leave, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to be living, learning to live while we're preparing to die. So that, and there were moments, and it was always when we were angry and tired and frustrated and all of those terrible things that you experience when you're living with an illness.
Heidi, do you think at that moment and looking back, you would have raised your hand and said, hey, I need for you guys, a family member, a friend, someone in town to say, can you come over here? I need you for 4 hours or 2 hours, or I just need to go play a game of tennis. Would that have changed a lot of that scenario, a lot of those dynamics for you?
Yes, and we were these were the important pieces, and this is definitely something that I would encourage any and everybody to look for and to ask for and to demand, really, because there are always people around looking to help. So we had a neighbor, Michelle, who was a godsend, and she would come over and clean. And she would say, and she would hang out and talk with us while she was doing that. Because again, with ALS, you're constantly, I was physically caring for him for the majority of the disease. So you couldn't just sit there and clean, because you'd have to watch him. And so things like that. I always had somebody for about 1 hour a day, maybe 45 minutes, so that I could get out and move. Exercise is extremely important to me. It has always been since I was little, and it continues to be now that I'm almost 50. It's super important. And I knew, in terms of going back to that thought of I have to take care of myself to be able to take care of you, if I didn't get that almost hour of movement, I was a very different person, and my mental state was very different. So I did, and there were people that would come for that time. And that made a big difference.
Big difference. Wow.
I really. Oh,
so,
go check. No, you go.
So we've kind of transitioned here where you all have had a talk, and you're like, he says he can't do it without you, and you're like, I'm afraid. I think you've really addressed some significant issues. There's a moment where what leads up to you saying, you both deciding you're going to get married.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Why?
Let's do
why
it.
then?
Let's do
you
it.
know what I mean? Like, why then? Why not?
And I say, why not?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So before Kurt got sick, I was talking marriage. Again, my 55 stuffed animals, I always wanted children. I wanted a family. Education, super important to me. A career of some sort, always super important. But the core of me wanted a family, and I loved Curtis Vance. So getting married was on my docket. It was something I really wanted to do. It was the plan. We got to do the plan. So, even after he got sick, I would bring it up. I would bring it up, not all the time, but some of it was legality. I mean, there were a lot of things going on, especially with ALS. He at the very beginning chose that he did not. He wrote a living will saying he didn't want a feeding tube and he didn't want a trach, which can extend someone's life with ALS. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, what right do I have? All those sorts of things. So we ended up taking care of the legality in terms of I became power of attorney, all of that. So that wasn't the reason, because although we were young, we realized how to do all of that legally. So the real thing was, in October of 1999, he ended, and this was now almost a year from when he was diagnosed, and he was having trouble swallowing and eating. and drinking, quite frankly. And so although he had always said no feeding tube, no trach, we went down to Mass General on our monthly visit, and I loved the people there, still love them, keep in touch with some of them. And essentially they said, listen, a feeding tube is really a good idea. And Kurt said, okay, but I don't want the trach. And so they said, well, it's better to die of respiratory distress than dehydration and malnutrition. So he chose the feeding tube, but he chose it very late in the disease if you compare it to when others would. And he could not be fully sedated for that surgery, and he wanted me in there for it. And so I was in there for it. And at one moment in time, they basically pushed me out because they were going to lose him. And he almost died 3 times when he got that feeding tube. And when he came out, he was basically like, we're doing this. We're getting married. And it was very much a spiritual moment. It was, we have to declare, we were not very religious people, but we were very spiritual. And it was like, we just have to do this. We have to do this for us. We want to be united in eternity. And that was it.
Yeah. Wow. So you get married, and kind of tell me the story after you get married, and then what happens, because I know the after of this, and I know you touch on this in your book, that's a big part of your story, Heidi. And that's what I love, because we want to get through this part, but I want to talk about after, because your life, like what I said in the intro, your life did not stop. You have grown and you have continued. So tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. So, yes, so we got married, and I think, I believe very strongly that one can have a play in their end, and I do think that being married was very important to Curtis. And he died 22 days later. He never did get that trach because he didn't want it. He died in our home that we were living in, which was super important. And so the year after Kurt was gone was extremely difficult for me, much more difficult than the year that he was sick. 100%. I learned a ton about grief. I learned a ton about just being able to deal with those feelings of thinking you're going to be alone, and missing that person that is the one person that you're with all the time and you tell everything to, all that sort of thing. Right. And so I believe very strongly in that Curtis was with me. He's still with me. He guides me. We talk to one another much more back then than now, but he's still right here. And so I do believe strongly that he helped bring Paul into my life. After Kurt died, I never even considered dating or anything for, I don't know, probably about a year. Curtis and I did start a nonprofit foundation, which is no longer a 501c3. I have let that slip by. But for that first year and a half after Kurt died, that was huge. It kept me going. It got me up. It was very important to Kurt for us to raise money for this disease and for caring for people with this disease. Primarily because of our experience, but also because he knew there was a very good chance other people in his family would live through this. So that kept me going. And I did meet a couple of people through doing events all around the country, which is what I was doing for the foundation, reconnecting with high school and college friends who were living very different lives than I was at the time. But they were very accepting and met me where I was and supported me. And so I did meet a couple of people, and then and never thought much of anything. I figured I would, if I ever have another relationship, it'll be with somebody older, probably divorced, something like that, or widowed. Yep. But anyway,
you decided what it was going to be. I got you, Heidi.
I did.
You laid out the plan, but that wasn't the plan. I got you.
It was not. It was not. I ended up meeting somebody 2 years younger than myself, and in his case, his mom at the time was battling cancer, and so we kind of met on that level, and it's a wonderful story. My uncle worked for a company that was having a happy hour for somebody's birthday. It was actually my now husband's birthday, and he said, "You need to come. I have 4 eligible bachelors," and I thought, "Oh, Uncle Paul, no, I am nowhere ready for this," and he said, "You're coming." And so my mother said, what's the worst that can happen? Another great piece of advice from a mom. What's the worst that can happen? You need to go. And so anyway, I met all the bachelors, met Paul last, and I was kind of tired. It was later on in the evening. He was late to his own party, which is very, very typical Paul. And he basically, he says, so what's your story? What's going on? And I said, I'm a 25-year-old widow. And he said, tell me about it. And that was how we met.
Wow. How long have you been married, Heidi?
20 years. We celebrated 20 years in November.
Wow. All right, Natalie, we're going to need to take a break because we are in the after stage, and that's what we're talking about.
Yes, let's take a break. I don't know about you, but my inbox is always cluttered with useless emails. But there's one I always open, the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver newsletter. You may say, Natalie, what makes yours so special? Well, I'm biased, but don't just take my word for it. Here's what our subscribers say they love. First, it comes once per month, and you can read it in under 5 minutes. Next, you'll find amazing tips and resources to use in your everyday life. And who doesn't love a recommendation? These sisters do, which is why we share sister-approved products and discount links to save you time and money. And of course, you're first to know about the upcoming month's confessions. Just like our show, you're guaranteed to relate, be inspired, leave with helpful tips and resources, and of course, laugh. Go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, to sign up for our newsletter today.
All right, everybody. We are back here with Confessions. We're here with Heidi McCann. We've gotten through the before, we're in the during, and now we're in the after, the stages after ALS. And Heidi has met someone, and her introduction was, I'm a 25-year-old widow, and he said, tell me about it. And that's an opening.
Isn't that interesting? Because most people will be like, all right, well, I'm going to just go over here to the other side of the bar. It was really nice meeting you.
Moving on.
That lady. We're not sure what happened with her. So, okay.
So, Heidi, how did, you tell the story, and you guys have been married 20 years now. And I feel like this story is really woven in your relationship. And you've written the book. You have children. You have 4 kids and 2 dogs.
Yes. I mean, you got what you wanted there.
Yeah, it got to the point. It's woven in your life. And tell me about what caregiving did for you that year. But then you mentioned your mom has Parkinson's, of course. Tell me, there's so much to tell me about the after. But tell me how this is woven into these past 22 years.
Oh, yes. So I think that certainly the entire experience of caring for Curtis, living through a terminal illness, learning to live while preparing to die, because I really was preparing to die myself because Curtis and I were so in it together. So when I woke up the day after he died and realized I was still alive, which was a really, it was a poignant moment. And I said, I am going to live life for both of us. And that's what I do. I mean, Curtis is inside my soul. I don't know any other way. This is when I'll cry because I feel him all the time. And I knew that if I were to move on with my life, I would do it for myself. Right. And I would do it in honor of Curtis, in honor of a life that he couldn't live. And I was very clear about that with Paul. There was never, when we first started dating, hours and hours and hours of conversations, and I would tell him my story, and then we certainly shifted, and that was over. I was able to get that done, and now we were going to start our own life. Right. But that caregiving, I take care of Paul as many wives may take care of their husbands, and he takes care of me. I think what I learned from my experience with Curtis, the way that I cared for him and kept him alive physically, Paul keeps me alive emotionally. And I wouldn't have recognized that if I hadn't gone through what I went through with Curtis. And I don't think I would have looked for somebody or settled down with somebody who could do that for me if I hadn't experienced what I had experienced. And
Wow.
Paul is an amazing soul. He's I don't know what else to say beyond that. He understands me.
What a thought. I'm sitting here actually thinking about my own husband. Natalie, don't tell him that I'm thinking positive thoughts about him.
I know, right?
I know. But to say that there are people that keep you alive physically, but people that keep you alive emotionally, that really support you in that manner, Heidi, that is your partner. Like, that is who you all have your strengths. So that is really touching. That I love that Curtis is with you. And I think about that with Dad, Natalie, because, you say, and while it's a parent figure, I always know, people might think I'm crazy. I had a diving experience, for example. I had an issue with being out too far in the water and running low on air, and my husband was with me, and it was a little treacherous situation. But I will say that the only person that I was talking to at that moment, because I was really a little fearful for my life, I am a little dramatic. I was like, I think this is it, Lord. And Dexter said, you know what you did? And I said, what? And he said, you were talking to your dad, like, Dad, if you could just help me. And I think about that now, and I was like, why was I talking to Dad? But I feel like he's always there with me. So that's kind of somebody that impacts your life like that. I love that he's in your soul like that. So you've got 4 kids, 2 dogs. Your mom has told you that caregivers need to take care of themselves so they can take care of others. Can you tell me a little bit about where you are with your mom right now?
Yes. So my mom is 10 years into Parkinson's. And she is physically, she is 100% mobile. So she is, needs some help with, putting earrings on or buttoning a shirt, stuff like that. But she lives in Florida the majority of the time, and in Vermont, and also they built an in-law suite off the back of our house here in Simsbury, Connecticut. And that is something that came about because of my experience with Curtis. So when my mom was first diagnosed, and then a couple years later when they were retiring and they were living in downtown Hartford and wanted to move out of there. And so we had a discussion. We had many discussions. And I essentially said, you need to plan now. You don't want to be scrambling. That's with a physical illness. That is one of the things, if anything, I learned, if you can set things up now. So they ended up knowing they're very privileged. They're very fortunate to have these homes. And they said, but let's create a space that is 100% handicap accessible, should she need it. Because I said, Mom, I will care for you when the time comes. But I have 4 kids and 2 dogs right now. And so if you can be in where I am, because I don't think I can go to where you would be. Right. And that's why they built the space. And thankfully, it's not needed. She doesn't need a 100 full-time caregiver at this point. Right. But it's set up for it. And I think that's wonderful.
I'm always like talking, Nellie, because I have all these questions for Heidi. So I do have one question, and then I'm going to stop talking, Nellie. So here's my question. Totally fine. So you have siblings. I know you have 2 sisters. I kind of know the answer to this. You said, Mom, I'll take care of you. Did everybody else say, absolutely, Heidi, you can have her?
They just push you forward, go, Heidi, go, Heidi.
I'm always curious about that. How did that work
out? I think it was expected. I'm the middle girl of three girls, and we all
middles are the best.
Yes. We all bring something to the table, right? We all do.
Yes.
And I think that what I bring to the table in terms of my original family unit is, I'm the mediator, I'm the peacekeeper, I'm the doer. So I think it wasn't an issue. It was just like, yes, you will. That makes sense. Now, my older sister very well may be somebody who physically, she cared for my grandmother when my grandmother was, she lived a very long life till she was 91, needed some help the last few years, and she lived with my parents, but my sister is the one who cared for her. So I do see my older sister taking part, but not living with my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? It's, and we all have our jobs. You know what I mean? We have our duties, we know our skill set, we know where we lean in and that sort of thing. And so it's always interesting to be like, oh, of course. And the Schlessel sisters, they're some of our favorite. They're just a touch younger than us, about 10. And,
or 20.
But those sisters, or 20, and what whatever. And but those sisters are also caring for their brother who's is disabled, and then also thinking about their mom. The conversations that we have, like they're like, and you have just been in this place where you care, because the reality is that, you know, you've had this lived experience and it's just carried over and over and over. Yeah. So Jay, I mean, I don't mind to tell everybody my power went out. And so my power went out and it clicked. And so my timer stopped over again. And I want to make sure that we're not over, Jay, on sister questions.
We are at 40 minutes, Natalie. So we will.
Okay.
But if everybody was curious about why I got to talk today, it was Natalie lost power.
I lost power. And so everybody's welcome. So now you got to know what JJ sounds like. But okay, so let's do sister questions. And Jay, if you'll just make sure, keep an eye on it for our friends. Like we try to do it around 45 minutes, but don't worry, we'll be back after the confession.
I
So
know.
we'll have more to share, because there's more with Heidi that I know that I want to ask about.
Oh,
so okay, Jay, what's your sister question?
Oh my gosh. So I had so many, and now I'm like, okay, I just went ahead and jumped in there and asked them.
I know, right?
So let me think.
I think go tipsy.
Go tipsy? Oh, tipsy's
Go
good.
tipsy.
So tip that you would give someone that's, you talked about planning for the house now with your mom, but tips that you would give someone that are, especially a younger mind, tips that you would give someone going into a journey like this, Heidi.
Yeah. So I think that make a list. Make a list of what you need in any given moment. And that list is going to change daily or weekly or monthly, whatever your situation, because people are always going to say to you, what can I do? And you never have an answer. And in my experience, it's the people that just do things that end up being the ones that are the helpers, because you as a caregiver don't have the time or the energy or whatever to do it. If you make a list, though, if you really think about it, like what do I need? I think that because people want to help.
Good idea.
They want to help. So I would, now, have I done that later on in my life? No. But I think
do that with your kids, Heidi. Make a list. Do the laundry.
Yeah.
Check.
Well, I am very proud to say 4 kids, 8 3/4 spread between eldest and youngest. I will say my children all do their laundry once they hit 5th grade. They do their own laundry and they make their own lunches from 6th grade on, because it's the only way it works.
Are they for rent? Can we borrow those kids?
I think those kids need to be my caregiver, because Jason and I don't have kids, so we'll adopt them as well.
We'll take your kids.
They can be our kids. We'll take them. I take a lot of people's kids. I got to hedge my bets.
Yeah.
Not sure about my nephews and nieces. I need them. I'm going to need them to step up for Aunt Natty. So
Okay, Natalie, hit it.
all right.
Your
so
question.
Here's my question, and this is always the favorite, and then we'll go back into after confessions because there's more to talk about. But what is your favorite guilty pleasure? The one thing that you do just for yourself.
Oh, I love that question. And it's so boring, so I wish it were better. But I mean, honestly, the number one thing is, for me, it's exercise, and ideally being outside for that exercise. I am a little bit of a gym rat. I love kickboxing. It's my favorite class. But I love to be outside. So, when Kurt was sick, we did get a puppy, and we had Woo Woo with us. And so during that time that I would get out once a day, it was always with Woo Woo, and we'd go into the woods. And that is a guilty pleasure of mine. I absolutely love it. I also love chocolate. So I do not drink coffee. I love the smell of it, don't like the taste. I'm a tea drinker, but I get my caffeine from chocolate because I eat enough of it.
I'm telling you. I think out of everybody now, chocolate may be the highlight. Hershey's, who else? Ghirardelli. Who else gets what? Lint?
Ghirardelli.
I don't know.
Lint. If Lint would like to sponsor us, you can, because I love your 90% dark chocolate.
Yeah, there you go, Heidi. I mean,
I don't eat milk chocolate. I like dark
chocolate sponsorship from Heidi's podcast for life,
Done.
Heidi, you're sponsored. We will get your chocolate.
Done.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us. This has been fantastic. And guys, stick around. We're going to do after the confession where Heidi is going to chat a little bit longer. There's more questions. There's more stuff to be told because Heidi has a daughter, and a daughter who she supports through long COVID. And there's your teaser. So guys, thanks so much for being with us. Heidi, thanks for being with us. We will make sure the book and all your contacts are in the show notes, and we will see you next time when we confess.